Hey, what's up? It is the Bober and Handley Pro Football Podcast. I want to wish everybody a very happy New Year, happy 2021 to you. We took a little bit of a holiday break, but we are back just in time for the playoffs. He is Chris Bober, the pro. I am Nick Handley with AM 590, ESPN Omaha. And Bober, first of all, happy New Year to you. Hope your holidays and everything were great. 2021, here we go. I know it's off to kind of a weird start after this week, but we're still hoping for a collectively better year.
Yeah, it should be a good year. I do know that we got a lot of football still going, the NFL still being played, and they did get in all 256 games.
Yeah.
Which goes to show you that if money is involved, they will get it done. NFL is a great example, honestly, for other parts of our society to say that if you're willing to work hard and get things done, you can live a somewhat normal life. So hopefully we all follow that example.
Well, and with there's a lot of storylines as we kind of get into the first weekend of the playoffs. I mean, it is considered a wild card weekend. You have just two teams really taking a rest, and that's the one seed in the NFC and the one seed in the AFC, the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs. But as we kind of got into Monday, we also know, as it's been commonly known in the NFL as Black Monday, you've got a lot of decisions that are made with personnel, whether it's head coaches, GMs, or even other, possibly even football operations guys. Maybe some of the ones that stood out, John Elway demoting himself from the GM job and promoting himself to football operations. So, that's one that I got to say it. I was talking about this on the show earlier this week. I like the move because I think John Elway, for a guy that can still really add a lot of value to an organization, he's got a lot of contacts as a football person, as someone who is a Hall of Famer as well. There's a lot of respect there. But when it comes down to making personnel decisions, sometimes you got to look at somebody maybe that's a little bit more fresh with the ideas to be able to keep things going in the right direction. So I actually kind of liked the John Elway move, where he removed himself from the GM and just basically gave himself the operations or the football operations position.
Yeah, plus it puts him in a position, I think, to where he probably will retire in a few years.
Yeah.
And they'll have someone in that role to where he can step away from it. Kind of reminds me of what like Coughlin did when he was down there. He kind of stepped out, or Parcells did the same thing, kind of stepped back, and it's like more of a consultant role than a day-to-day kind of thing. He is getting up there, and he probably wants to take some time and enjoy. That GM job's pretty tough.
Yeah. The other really, and maybe we'll still get this, Chris, is I feel like every year there's one either head coaching firing or GM firing that we don't see coming, because so far as of today, and this could change before this podcast even goes out, there's always one that surprises us. But right now there hasn't been one. I mean, Doug Marrone being fired, we knew that was coming. Adam Gase, Adam Gase for the last 3 weeks of the regular season was basically giving you every reason, like giving you the case verbally, telling you why he has failed. So you knew, and he knew that he was going to be done as soon as the regular season was over with.
Goes and wins a couple of games to get them out of the number one spot. Just to give them the year. Thanks, Jets.
Yeah, you can't even lose when we need you to lose. And then maybe the one sort of surprise, but again, you were hearing about this in the last few weeks, was Anthony Lynn with the Chargers. Now, that's an organization that I could look at and say, hey, it looks like they have identified their franchise QB. Their defense is getting better. They lost a lot of close games this year. How much of that do you pin on the head coach, and how much do you pin on just being a very young roster? But you've seen this a lot, especially being in the NFL. Sometimes those moves are made not just because you feel like the head coach is just not the right person for the job, but you just need accountability. You need to tell your fan base, and you need to tell everybody that, hey, this record was unacceptable, or we need to make a change. We need to freshen things up, because we do feel like we've got this young, exciting roster, but we've got to also get another person in charge of it. Maybe that's why Anthony Lynn ultimately goes.
Yeah, and believe me, everyone really, really likes Anthony Lynn. Just a salt of the earth guy. Guys love him as a coach. It just looks like a head coach to him is a little bit overwhelming, especially during the games and clock management and things like that. So if he has a fault, it was that he didn't get enough guidance during the things that he's not good at. You're looking at these head coaches, there's 6 head coaching jobs available. And I say San Diego, LA Chargers is definitely one of the with Justin Herbert in there, those receivers, they got some good D linemen. They have some they have some talent there. It's a very attractive job. I think there's two other ones that kind of stand out to me. The first one is Houston Texans, because I think Deshaun Watson, if you put talent around him, I think he's right on the level with Patrick Mahomes. Honestly, you look at what he did this year with 0 receivers. It was unbelievable. He led the league in passing yards, and he was getting his what handed to him day in and day out. I would love to coach him. I look for maybe Bieniemy or someone to go down there and be down there. But I also think Jacksonville's very strong too. They got a ton of draft picks. Sounds like they're going to probably hire the coach either at the same time or even before they hire a GM. So I know the Chiefs did that back when they hired Andy Reid. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago yesterday. And that worked out well because they found a system that worked. So there's other jobs out there, but there might be a surprise in here, but I think the surprise would, I don't know. You think it could come from what if the Bears go out and get blown out?
Right. Yeah.
What if, other than that, I think everyone else in the playoffs is pretty safe, and it doesn't seem like there's another coach that's just going to pop up. I'd be surprised though. I think the biggest thing might be the Bears. I mean, you might get this, you could go down the rails with some other coach, maybe like Doug Peterson or something, but
right.
Six is a low number, really. Six coaches, I think they average about 8 every year. So less turnover. Maybe that's because of the pandemic, and coaches couldn't be head coaches this year for an entire year. They just had the season to work with.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I feel owners are probably also trying to take under consideration is that you mentioned pandemic year. There's challenges within coaching during that, but also the financial challenges that come with that. I mean, if you're looking at coaches that still have a couple of years on their contract, these guys have to get buyouts. We know that the cap number, by all indications, is going to be lower. We don't know what that number is going to be. So when making these decisions on whether to keep someone or not, you got to look at, how much is it going to cost to buy them out? How much is it going to cost to buy their staff out? I mean, that's all something that has to be talked about if you are in ownership. You mentioned the Bears. Yeah, that's one. I right now, I feel like Matt Nagy's probably safe. A lot of reports are saying that he's probably going to be back. I mean, if you look at him, and I'm not going to try to change my tune. I think there are a lot of things about Matt Nagy as a head coach that I still feel it at the very least remains to be seen. But if you do look at the hard facts, Lovie Smith, who was a relatively successful coach for the Chicago Bears, he didn't even have the kind of start that Matt Nagy is having right now. Matt Nagy has now put the Bears in the playoffs in the last 2 out of 3 years. He has not had a sub 500 record yet. Back-to-back 8-8 seasons, though, backing your way into the playoffs. If they do get blown out, where I would look for the Chicago Bears organizational changes would be at the top with Ted Phillips or general manager Ryan Pace. I do expect them to take a hard look at Ryan Pace, because going back to when you look at the service time left on contracts, Matt Nagy still has 2 years on his contract. Ryan Pace only has 1 more year. And blowing out just a GM, there's not an entire coaching staff that comes with it that you have to buy out. Now, there's some personnel guys along with them, but they're not making the same kind of money as assistant coaches. So that one financially could make more sense as well. You bring up another one that I am going to keep my eye on, and I think we're all kind of interested. We're going to get into the reason why, too, is Doug Peterson in Philadelphia. It just was not a good year. And depending on what they want to do with Carson Wentz and everything that kind of transpires in the next month, I would still say Doug Peterson is a name to kind of at least pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to kind of recap that situation, I'll give you my 2 cents. First of all, I hate the Eagles. The only time in my whole life I want the Eagles to win and they go out and lose in the way they did. Now, the Giants, believe me, as a Giants alum and fan, I can't blame anyone except for the Giants for not winning enough games to get there. So that's not the reason I think it's such a travesty of what happened. But my personal take on it is, it wasn't that it happened. Like I personally believe, and I think everyone else believes, that the Eagles tanked, right? They lost that game because they got they gained 4 draft positions, and that's a big deal. Going from 10 to 6 is a really nice deal to get a better player. And they're going to get some value there, right? And I think I heard someone equate it to about a 2nd-round pick if you wanted to trade up 4 spots in the draft. Okay, there's value that they got there by losing this game. However, I think they're going to actually lose more in the buy-in that they lost from all their veterans now, right? So what they didn't do is they didn't give anyone a heads up that they were going to do this. And I know what it's like to be on a losing team that's not going to make the playoffs. Sometimes you have decisions that are made that, you know, you don't like, but at least if you know of them ahead of time, you feel like, okay, we'll deal with it. But
Yeah.
to go in the fourth quarter and say, we're going to put up the third string quarterback in, and you got guys like Jason Kelsey and the whole line and all the veterans that I think, and honestly, I think Doug Peterson lost those guys. I think he did. I think he totally turned on them. And as a player, you go out there and give so much. And this is the last quarter of the entire season. And they all felt like they sold him out. He sold them out. I know what that feels like. And I'm telling you, they're going to lose more in veteran buy-in than they gained in that 4 picks in the draft. And I don't think Peterson recovers from this, honestly. I think you see them go worse next year and then they fire him. I just seen it so many times when a coach loses his guys on his team. That's what happens. And those guys are never going to trust him again. I mean, you know how betrayed they felt to be on national TV and look embarrassed like that when you put so much into it. I thought Joe Judge did a great job of kind of sticking up for his guys. That's real. You know, that is how you win games or how you just survive in the NFL. And he's not going to ever get his guys to go any farther than what they have to do. So I think it's a horrible look. I think it will ultimately be his eyes. And congratulations, they got 4 spots better in the draft. But I don't see Peterson recovering from this with any of those guys. He's got to get rid of all them because they won't trust him.
Yeah. Well, and you know, you bring up Joe Judge. I did kind of laugh when he said that he refuses to disrespect the game. He'll never do that. And you know, say 2 years from now they're in a possible, you know, in a potential locked into a number 2 seed. They go into week 17 and they rest all their starters. I'm like, all right, well, let's remember that. Is that disrespecting the game there when you're? But I think I got it. What his point is, the Doug Peterson part of it. This is what bothered me the most about what I saw in that game. You know, we talk about in the sports landscape all the time about tanking, but none of us can really watch, you know, 4 quarters of a football game or 9 innings of a baseball game or 4 quarters of a basketball game and say, yep, look what they're doing. I mean, it's happening right in front of us. We're watching that in this Eagles game. And you're saying, oh my gosh, they are physically tanking because of one move. Jalen Hurts, I get it, wasn't great in that game, but then you decide to bring in Nate Sudfeld and you're watching him throw balls into like the stand, into the tarped off area, the first 5 rows of the stadium. I mean, you're like, what the hell is this? This is not a winning move. This is a move of, yep, white flag. We are throwing in the towel. And then for Doug Peterson to basically contradict himself in the postgame. Now, honestly, Chris, if you're going to do something like that, and your points are valid, and you know it way better than I would as far as the locker room effect and what your guys are thinking when something like that happens. But if Doug Peterson in the postgame, just from a media standpoint, if I'm listening to this and he says, yeah, you know what? It was a time of the year that we wanted to get other guys in. So whether you want to say it wasn't the best position to help us win, that's fair, but we wanted to get Nate Sudfeld in. Instead, he says, in no way were we trying to lose that game. We were trying to win the game. And yet I thought it was time that we got Nate Sudfeld in the game. You can't say one and then say the other, because the one thing that you said about we're trying to win the football game should completely eliminate the decision you made in bringing in Nate Sudfeld. And so that to me was just a bold-faced lie. That's the problem I had with it, is he was just not being honest when he very well could have been.
And there was a way to do that, honestly. To his veterans, and they would not have felt like they got sold down the river. So there was a way to do that, and by mishandling this again, I just got this feeling that those guys are going to hold it against him until he's gone.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, and you're probably right. It maybe has more of a 2021 effect to it than it does right now, but we'll see. But the other thing I wanted to get to, and just be kind of, as we kind of get off of this topic too, as far as the vacancies, I agree. I think Houston is a very uh, attractive position right now, and we
Yeah,
know
for
that
the
the wheel.
draft picks.
Yes, the wheels are spinning right now. Jacksonville, to me, though, is also got to be right up there because you get the number one pick.
Mm.
You know that you're probably going to get either Trevor Lawrence. I would assume it's Trevor Lawrence, if not maybe a Justin Fields. But so you're a coach, you're going in, you can identify your franchise quarterback right from the get go and the amount of cap space that Jacksonville has, even what's going to be a reduced cap coming up. I think Jacksonville, just knowing that this is still a team that was recently removed from the AFC Championship game, they've got the opportunity to kind of rebuild that organization. And what you've seen too, Bober, the NFL, this is why we love it. This is the one professional league that you can go from worst to first in the snap of a finger. So I think Jacksonville and Houston would probably be my top two picks as far as the most attractive spots right now.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. There's a the opportunity to be a head coach in the league is very special. So they all have opportunities. It's right now those look like if handled correctly could see success, long
Yeah.
term sustained success if done right.
So we get into an expanded playoff, the Wildcard Weekend. We've seen now 14 teams in the playoffs, and one team in particular that would not have been in the playoffs if it wasn't an expansion would be the Chicago Bears. We'll get to that matchup here in a bit. But when you kind of take a look at some of these Saturday matchups, first of all, I want to go with one, and I know this is the prime time, so we're kind of going in reverse for Saturday's lineup. But because there's a little bit of smack talk going on in this one, and that is the Washington football team and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was talking to Jeff Dickerson of ESPN Chicago, and I brought up the fact that everybody always says for teams that are underdogs that, hey, you have a chance in any game because it's the NFL.
Mm.
Because the any given Sunday, or in this case any given Saturday, you always have that opportunity. But other than using that statement and sort of that generality, I can look at the Washington football team and say, and again, this, and we talk to our buddy Dave Tolson all the time, who went up against Tom Brady a lot. If you can get at his feet, you can cause problems. We know Tom Brady to be amazing, the GOAT, but he's not fleet of foot. Washington can do that.
Mm.
If the very least, they have a very good front seven. And Chase Young, and I love him. I think he is a tremendous rookie. We saw what he did at Ohio State. The guy is going to be a star, already is a star. He's saying he's excited to play Tom Brady. And some people are kind of like, whoa, whoa, you got to be able to crawl before you can walk. I have no problem with it because even though they're the home team,
Mm.
Chris, this is a team that has nothing to lose and
Mm.
everything to gain. So even though that they are technically the higher seed, there's way more on the line for Tampa Bay. I always feel like, and I'm not trying to predict that I think Washington wins this football game, but I like the kind of confidence and sort of the looseness and a little bit of the smack talk that they're bringing into that game because they do have a formidable front seven.
Yeah, and they do, and this is an interesting matchup that, especially that Tampa offense versus the Washington defense, because they are so talented up front. They got 4 first-round picks. They can absolutely get after the quarterback and cause wreak havoc up there. Plus, you have a Tampa team with Mike Evans, who is questionable now. They
Yeah.
said it wasn't a bad knee injury, but he's banged up. They do have Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin and Gronkowski. But that's the matchup, I think, that if it comes down to the end of the game, the offense always kind of overcomes that. The hard part about this game is going to be Tampa's defense, which is very good.
It is
right?
good.
They're solid. They're I don't know statistically how good they are, but they do make some plays. They do very well against the run. They have some back end problems, but I don't think the Washington football team is going to be able to score that many points, honestly. Because, they got Alex Smith back there, who I love. Comeback player of the year. They should name the comeback player the Alex Smith trophy, right? But, dude, he's not going to be able to play playoff level football, right? And I just think that this might not be the game that we all thought it was going to be. But I think that Tampa ultimately, if you look at Tom Brady versus Alex Smith, at the end of the game, I know Tom Brady's going to come back and win that game. You know what I mean? So that I really hope that we do have a knockdown drag out. Tom Brady maybe bloodied up a little bit, but I just don't see him not being able to overcome that defense, especially when the game's on the line. So look for a really good physical game. And if Tampa's defense shows up, Washington. The line on this is 8.5.
Yeah.
So it might be worth looking at leaning towards Washington for that spread. But I think Tampa wins this game. I don't have any doubt that Tampa wins this game. They got Tom Brady. You know what I mean? But I like this is the ultimate underdog here, right? They don't even have a viable quarterback really, right?
They might use two. I mean, Ron Rivera said they might use two.
Yeah. So this should be a knockdown drag out, but look for Tom Brady to get this win.
The thing that I like about Washington in this spot, and I'm kind of with you, I think Tampa, if it comes down to making a play, their offense is just much better than the Washington offense. So, and you're right. As much as we want to talk about the Washington defense, Tampa's is pretty good too, and they're pretty good at all levels. But the thing that I like about Washington in this spot is, from an organizational standpoint, none of us expected, first of all, the NFC East to be as bad as it was a year ago, and it might have even been worse this year. But we also did not expect that if someone were to kind of be the slimmest kid at fat camp and make their way into the playoffs, it would not be Washington, because organizationally they're just a mess. So the fact that they're already there, this is tremendous opportunity and experience for those young players. I would have said the same thing about the New York Giants. There were two teams out of the NFC East that if they made the playoffs, it would not matter what they did in that first game. It just is about getting there. The Giants and the Washington football team were going to be those two teams. So Washington is there. So I think whatever they can accomplish, if they can keep this thing competitive, and they can gain so much valuable experience from this moment against a very talented Tampa team, I think this is going to do wonders for them going forward. I really do. So I do expect Tampa Bay to win this game, but I also expect Washington to show up. I expect them to play kind of like that team that has nothing to lose. They will make Tampa uncomfortable in a lot of moments. But yeah, probably at the end, Tom Brady, this offense makes enough plays that they win. I don't necessarily know if they cover that number, but I think they win.
Yeah, I agree. It'd be nice if Washington's ceiling is limited by whether or not they can get a quarterback that can help them win games. Yeah. They have a lot of other pieces.
Another game this kind of goes a little bit more into my AFC sort of, climate right now, is the Colts and the Bills, and that's the first game on Saturday, and that is a CBS 12 o'clock kickoff. The Bills, I think, Chris, this could sound crazy, and don't reach across the computer and smack me upside the head right now, but if I had my AFC power rankings right now, I've got Buffalo in front of Kansas City. I think Buffalo is playing tremendous football right now. I think they are an extremely tough out. I think Josh Allen is still, even with the amount of games this year that he has, been able to account for multiple touchdowns, I still feel like there's a little bit of disrespect with Josh Allen that you're kind of waiting for him to sort of blow up. I think Buffalo is as good as there is right now. Now, the Colts, for a team that is a 7 seed, I mean, this is not the 7th seed Chicago Bears in the NFC. This is a 7 seed that is 11-5. They're a good football team too. It wouldn't shock me if the Colts would be able to do something and pull something off. But am I overselling the Buffalo Bills in your opinion?
No, I don't think so. Honestly, I totally agree with you. We'll get into the Chiefs and what they're doing good and bad probably next week as we preview whoever they play. Yeah. But the AFC is a much tougher road, right? I mean, with the exception of maybe Indianapolis and I guess, Cleveland, who now is all beat up with COVID. I think anyone could beat the Chiefs in the AFC, and it's a much tougher road. Green Bay, I think, I can almost lock them into the Super Bowl, but Kansas City is not playing as well as they were. They don't have momentum, and any of these teams that's playing well can come in there and knock them off. Now specifically with this game, I do think this is a huge mismatch. Playing in Buffalo, the weather's going to be in the 30s. Indianapolis is a dome team, and I don't want to paint people into a box, but that usually doesn't work well in the playoffs. Rivers is old, right? His bones are going to be creaky. Yeah. I hope this is a good game. I just feel like Buffalo's going to run them out of the stadium. I mean, they are doing so well. They have such momentum. They're so good. They're the best. I think they're 11-5 against the spread this year. So even with 6.5 points, I think laying that bet would actually be a smart bet.
Yeah, I kind of like that number.
I think Indianapolis kind of limped into the playoffs, honestly. The defense that they had, I don't think it matters against Josh Allen, and they can run the ball. Stephon Diggs is on cloud 9 right now. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to see them control the tempo, Jonathan Taylor run the ball. mix and match in there, but I just think Buffalo's going to just come out and just sling it and just walk away with, the fourth quarter being up by a few touchdowns that just kind of cruise to a victory.
Yeah, and I think this is another opportunity for Josh Allen. He had a great regular season. People are talking a lot more about him now. Now it's the playoffs. All right, let's put the money where the mouth is, and let's see if he can show up during the big stage. And so that's kind of I think the next sort of level for Josh Allen in this Buffalo team. But I cannot look at any team in the playoffs right now. And that's maybe with the exception of Green Bay, and say there's anybody playing better football right now than Buffalo. So that's kind of why I say I got them slightly ahead of Kansas City right now if I had a week-to-week power rankings. But then we also know Kansas City is champs for a reason, and they might just kind of be lying in the weeds right now at the perfect time. And then, okay, playoff time, it's go time.
Well, I want to see what teams are going to do to try to stop Josh Allen. Personally, I think that you have to pressure him, but keep him in the pocket. If he rolls out, especially to the right, he is Patrick Mahomes, honestly. If someone could pressure him and kind of contain blitz him, I think to force him to try to have to be accurate under pressure is probably his biggest weakness. Mm-hmm. Hasn't shown up much this year because he's overcame it. But Indianapolis is not a pressure team, right? Yeah. They're good up front. They rush with their own guys and play man or coverage behind it. So I just don't think it's a great matchup.
The other game, it's a divisional game. It's the afternoon game between Seattle and Los Angeles. That'll be a 3:40 Fox kickoff on Saturday. Rams Seahawks. The Seahawks are a slight favorite at home. Look, it's not the same 12th man advantage that Seattle usually has at home, so I don't really put a lot of stock into the home field advantage. I will say this when it comes to the NFC, and I've kind of hinted at this throughout our podcast this season. When the Rams have things figured out, they're as good as anybody in the NFC. Jared Goff coming off of the thumb surgery, can he be effective? That is what you're going to have to watch. So in the first real, I think, 10 minutes of this game, you're going to know all you need to know about the Rams offense, because if Jared Goff is still feeling the effects, and there's no way he's 100% in this game, but if he is able to execute the offense, I do like Los Angeles in this football game. Defensively, they have been able to have a lot of success against Russell Wilson and that offense. So if Goff can play at an effective level, even at 80%, I think I do like the Rams. But both of these teams, Chris, you could make a case for them, no matter who they're playing, of making it to the NFC Championship or losing in the first round. They have given you that on paper this year. They've given you that with their body of work, where they've looked tremendous one week and you're thinking, boy, these are great football teams. And then there's other weeks where you're thinking, maybe not so much. So that's the other thing, is what do we see out of either one of these teams, with Goff injured or not? I just don't know what to expect out of either one of these teams.
Yeah, let's not forget the Rams lost to the Jets.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So they are definitely a hot and cold team. But as I look at this game, the huge question mark here is Goff, obviously. Because if you have Wolford out there, I actually liked him.
He played well.
What he did last week.
Yeah.
He runs the ball a little bit. He didn't look too bad, but going into the playoffs, he's nowhere near the talent or experience to count on him to be super effective. The Rams, of course, have a great defense, right? Yep. It's overlooked with them is how good they are on defense oftentimes. Now look at the Seahawks. It's so interesting. We saw this, I think, this year more than I feel like I've seen in a long time, is these teams that come out and they start the year in one way and they finish the year in another way, but they're still winning football games, right? At the beginning of the year, the whole let Russ cook thing was going on, and they were scoring 50 points a game, and they had no defense. Yeah. You look at where they are now. Russell Wilson is not playing that great right now. Their defense is playing well. They picked up a couple of guys, Carlos Dunlap, Adams, and some of those guys have done some good things. And now they run the ball. They got Chris Carson back, and Russell Wilson just kind of sits back and controls the tempo, and then he's got the ability to win at the end, which is very dangerous. So this should be a good game. I'm hoping Goff does come back and he is close to 100%, so that we have a competitive game. The one thing I will say about this game is to maybe bet on the under, right? Neither of these teams is a high scoring team. It's 42.5 now, which I think you could still bet and get a good line on that. I think it's a great bet to bet the under on this, because both these teams want to run the ball, right? They want to control. I mean, LA probably has to run the ball. Even if Goff's back, he's not going to be 100%. They're not going to take too many chances, right? And then Seattle is now a run team as well. And both these teams play defense. They grind it out. So this could be like a 17-14 game. I don't know who to pick in this, but the only pick I would really have in this is the under.
Yeah, I like that. I still am slightly leaning towards the Rams again because I go with what I think is the best unit on the field in this matchup, and I think that is the Rams defense, and I think they could get a turnover here and there. And if this is a close game, like I think you and I are both sort of anticipating, that could be the difference. So, but again, if Goff is a liability, if he's letting a couple balls float on him, hey, all of a sudden that makes a pretty average Seattle defense all of a sudden very effective. So we'll see. I guess I'm kind of slightly leaning towards the Rams, but I wouldn't put money on it.
Yeah, the Rams are getting 3.5 points, and I think that's a good value right there. Because if Seattle, if it's tight up at the end and they drive down and kick a field goal to win, then of course they'll cover. So that could be the move right there.
I would jump on that number now. Yeah.
Yeah, because I imagine a lot of money. I'm surprised the line hasn't changed. Well, it was -5, now it's 10 to 3.5.
Yeah.
So you want to jump on that before it gets to 3, because I think money will push that down to 3 to hedge the bettors or the handicappers out there.
Yeah, definitely. 2 out of 3 of the games on Sunday, I think, are going to be fantastic. And we'll start with the very first one, the Ravens-Titans. If there is a fly in the ointment in the AFC, I still think it's got to be the Ravens, because this is a team that is largely underachieved as far as what we thought that they would be. Lamar Jackson is kind of getting himself on a heater all of a sudden, which I think is dangerous for the rest of the AFC field. This team is playing with confidence. Tennessee, I do like. I mean, how can you not like Derrick Henry? But their defense still is a problem, especially on third downs, in my opinion. Lamar Jackson and the offense with the confidence go all the way back to that Monday Night Football game where they were able to outlast the Browns. It felt like that was sort of that momentum swing that this organization needed. And I just feel like this is a team that is now feeling very more confident than they would have been a month ago about the playoffs. So you got the Ravens taking on the Titans. Ravens are a road favorite at 3.5. And I'm going to say I love the Ravens in this spot. I would take the Ravens laying the 3.5.
3.5 is a great number. I'm seeing 3 here. So it depends on where you get this. This could be the best game of the week. Both of these teams are I'm not going to say carbon copies of each other, but they both really, really like to run the football. They do it in different ways. Baltimore obviously is going to use the quarterback, right? And that's what Lamar Jackson and Baltimore has done really well, historically well, honestly, because we're talking about King Henry over here, but Baltimore has been rushing for like 300 and 400 yards a game. Again, like I said, it reminds me of the UNO of 1999. We led the rushing division. They're doing that at the NFL level. It's pretty amazing. Now, their limitations are still that Lamar Jackson is not throwing the ball that well.
Yeah.
When you run the ball that good, that's not showing up. I think it will show up in a playoff game eventually and hurt them big time. But Tennessee, I like everything about Tennessee. I wonder when they're going to like not be on, right? Like when is Derrick Henry going to get worn down? When it's like they how they call their offense, how they run it. I think they're doing such a great job. Tannehill's playing awesome. I love their big receivers. They got a lot to like here. So this is a very even game to me. I think it's a revenge game, right? Because remember, Tennessee knocked Baltimore last year was the best team in the NFL until they lost this game. I worried about them, the Chiefs going to Baltimore and have to try to beat them. This year, I don't think they're quite as good, but this game is very it's a coin flip to me. I mean, I like Baltimore 3.5. I do like Baltimore, but man, this is it could go either way here. This is going to be old school football and should be a great football game.
The afternoon game I wouldn't chalk up as one of the great games. That's Chicago, New Orleans. Look, I get it. This game it was decided in overtime in Chicago earlier this year, but there's a couple things that I think are important. Now, most of it works in favor of New Orleans, one for Chicago. Nick Foles was the quarterback for Chicago at that time, and Nick Foles is not a mobile guy. I mean, if there's anything about Mitchell Trubisky is what they've been doing with him lately is they're rolling him out. They're cutting the field down in half. That helps him. That allows him to use some athleticism. So, maybe that helps the Chicago offense a little bit more. But the other part of that previous matchup, Michael Thomas was not playing for the Saints. That was a big issue right there. And so he most likely is playing. I know he's on IR. He should be cleared. If this game was played on Saturday, it might have been a little bit more dicey. I know Alvin Kamara is still on the COVID reserve list, but by Sunday, he could very well be cleared and could very well play. And the other big issue for Chicago, it hasn't been made official, but I saw the line has moved from 8.5 to 10. Roquan Smith, the outstanding linebacker, probably the Chicago Bears defensive MVP of the season, is most likely out with a dislocated elbow. And the reason that that is huge, Chris, is because what Sean Payton loves to do with his running backs out of the backfield in the passing game, match him up with linebackers. Roquan Smith is one of the best coverage linebackers that you're going to see in all of the NFL. If he can't go and you got Danny Trevathan trying to cover Alvin Kamara or anybody else out of the backfield, that's going to be an issue. That's a matchup that Sean Payton and Drew Brees are going to try to exploit. So just so much on paper right now says New Orleans wins this game. New Orleans is going to be extremely fired up for this game. They're playing well. And the other thing about that previous matchup, by the way, when Chicago lost to New Orleans in overtime, is that the Bears defense was playing much better at that time. Right now, they're leaking. They're leaking bad. They've been dealing with injuries. Likely Roquan Smith is out. We'll see if they get their outstanding rookie corner, Jalen Johnson, back in. But if he can't go, you're talking about a fifth-round rookie and Kendall Vildor trying to cover some of those outstanding wide receivers too and going up against Drew Brees. So there's a lot of things working against Chicago's defense. I mean, it's still Mitchell Trubisky in a big spot. How could you even think about putting money on him? The only bright spot in this game for Chicago is their offensive line has seemed to kind of figure things out, and David Montgomery has been a much bigger weapon. Other than that, I've got nothing.
Yeah, I think the hardest matchup for the Bears here is matching up against the Saints defense, especially at home. The biggest qualifier for me was when I saw the Saints play the Chiefs, right? And of course, the Chiefs beat the Saints, but they were stuck to those receivers. I mean, their defense is good, way better than I think we're giving them credit for because you just think of the Saints, you don't think defense. But I think their defense is the strength of this team. Going up against the weakness of the Bears, I think it's a bad matchup there. And of course, the Saints are probably going to at least be able to score a few touchdowns. I just don't think the Bears will, right? And I don't know if I like 10, but yeah, I think that the Bears are going to really struggle on offense against that really, really good defense. And then, New Orleans is going to do enough to win this game. I just think the Bears have a bad matchup here. You might also consider the under here. The over/under is 47. I don't see a lot of points being scored here. I think we automatically have this bias that the Saints are going to be a huge high scoring team, but I don't think either of these teams score a lot of points here. I mean, this might be like a 24-10 game. You know what I mean? I think that New Orleans controls this game, but I think that it doesn't like they go off. Kamara's going to come back, but he's going to, he tested for COVID and he's going to miss a week of practice. So I think the Saints will be able to score. It's just not going to be an explosion. And I don't think the Bears will do much of anything. It'll just be a little bit frustrating for Bears fans. But that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and keep an eye on this if you are looking to take the Saints at 10. Even when Chicago has gotten beaten down in games, they are the kings of the fourth quarter backdoor cover. We saw them do that against Tennessee. It was a game that looked like it was 24-3, and then all of a sudden they get a couple garbage touchdowns before you know it's 24-17. So be mindful, even in what feels like a blowout, Chicago could cover that 10 points just because they do their best work when the game is over.
Nothing matters.
Yeah, I mean, that's that. There's a sign of a great team right there. So the primetime game, this one is going to be very interesting, and this one has kind of stolen the headlines because it's sort of led the conversations about what you should do with COVID when it comes to the playoffs. Should there be any kind of delay? Kevin Stefanski for the Browns head coach will not be able to coach because of COVID. You've got a couple other people personnel-wise. Stefanski can't even communicate he can communicate up until the game starts, but cannot communicate on headsets or anything. So he is not going to be a factor. They've had enough time to prepare for this. But the biggest loss, in my opinion, is Joel Bitonio, because I think it's equivalent to, we remember the outstanding offensive lineman Joe Thomas. If you were in a playoff spot and the Browns, when they had Joe Thomas, if Joe Thomas couldn't go, I think it's a similar impact because of how good the Browns run the football. You've got an all-pro offensive lineman that is going to miss this game because of COVID. To me, that is something that is a little bit bigger than, it's just an injury. They'll figure it out. Keep your eye on that one, because this is why Baker Mayfield has been so successful. He has not been asked to do a whole heck of a lot of anything. Play action has been very good for him. This has been the perfect formula for Baker Mayfield to be successful. If they can't run the ball and the Browns get into third and predictable, this is going to be I think, a big challenge for Baker Mayfield in this matchup against the Steelers defense that's not as good as they were at the beginning of the year, losing guys like Bud Dupree, but is still a very good defense that could make him pay for that.
Yeah, and I feel really bad for the Browns fans that it's just unfortunate that this had to happen right now, because Cleveland, I thought if at full strength here, this would be a very even football game. You look at what's happened here. Their left guard is out, like you talked about. They lost a receiver, and their head coach is out too. And remember, he's the play caller,
yep.
Right? And I forget who they said who's going to call the plays. It's the coordinator.
Yeah,
yep. My old buddy Mike Prefer, special teams coach, is going to be the head coach in this game. And I love Mike Prefer, but he is not. He's not Stefanski, right? Stefanski should get coach of the year, honestly.
I agree.
Whatever the award should get for coaching, it should go to him for what he's done out there.
Yep.
That I think that those chinks in the armor are enough to get you beat by the Steelers, right? The Steelers are I think this might be the only playoff win they get, but they're equal to the Browns at full strength, and with these guys out, I think they're better. In fact, I think it's going to be a frustrating game to watch, because I don't think Cleveland has a lot of success. It's just too hard. I mean, their first playoff game, Baker Mayfield's first playoff game, and all these things going wrong. I just don't see them being able to overcome what Pittsburgh can do. Remember, Mayfield without pressure is awesome, but the Pittsburgh Steelers can get some pressure, and this is not going to be last week's rest our guys Pittsburgh Steelers. This is going to be the full strength, coming at you Steelers. I just, the line went from 3.5 to 6. I still think that's a good line for Pittsburgh. Honestly, I think they win this game. I unfortunately, I like the Browns. I like everything about them until they had their coach and the All-Pro lineman, and these things go out. It's unfortunate that they had to do this, but I think the Steelers kind of run them up here and control this game.
On a side note, too, do you have any problem with the NFL saying, sorry, guys, but we got to stick to the schedule? It sucks that you can't have your head coach. It sucks that you can't have, Batonio in, but we got to stick to the schedule. Are you cool with that?
It's a bad draw, but I think they have to. I mean, they're being fair, right? Like, if this happened to the Chiefs or the Patriots or one of the Cowboys, someone who in the league is like much higher on, I think they do the same thing. There's just really no alternative here, right? This is a very structured environment here that has to go forward a certain way. And if you can put a guys on the field, then you got to go out there and do it. And I think it's the only way it gets done. There's no real way around it. Yeah. And it's just bad luck. I just really feel bad for the Browns.
The only thing that I wish the NFL, because of how innovative they are, especially with their communication and technology, is still allow Kevin Stefanski to communicate from wherever he is to his team, to basically still have that direct line to Baker Mayfield before the clock hits 10 seconds on the play clock. I still feel that they could do that. Given the circumstances, and maybe not even a regular season type setting, but in a playoff where that can be such an advantage or disadvantage. I still wish the NFL could have looked into that, but maybe there's just not enough time to get that situated. I don't know. I can't pretend to be an expert on that, but that's my only regret or my only disappointment with this is I still wish that they could allow Stefanski to communicate throughout the game.
And I wouldn't be surprised if someday they do figure that out, but I think it's more about security right now. Right. Yeah. I remember when I was playing, there was rumors of teams like stealing bandwidth and signals from each other.
Well, the Patriots? Was it the Patriots for that?
But, to have a guy at home, I mean, it's not a controlled environment, right?
Right.
If they had thought of this and put someone together would say, okay, well, we can monitor what you're doing there and only give you a direct feed. I mean, technology should be able to set that up here and soon. I think they will. They're just not ready for it right now. This might be the catalyst to get that going, though, so that in case this thing dribbles into next year, a head coach or a position coach, a play caller can have that link. If it's in a controlled environment, I would not be surprised if they really work hard to try to get that.
Yeah, it's a very good point about the security part. I didn't even really consider that either. So, All right, we're here. I mean, it's 2021. It is the first round of the playoffs, Wildcard Weekend. 3 games on Saturday, 3 games on Sunday. We'll be back next week to talk about the divisional round. We'll be able to talk about the number 1 seeds, the Green Bay Packers and the Kansas City Chiefs. Who will they be playing? Will we see any big upsets this weekend? This is the fun time of the season. And again, and we've said it all throughout the year, Bober, the fact that we are here on schedule is still a small miracle right there. So I think we should all be very excited that we're seeing playoff football. I'm with you. It kind of stinks for the Browns to maybe not have it exactly the way you want, but here we are on schedule, looking good, and we hope it stays that way.
Yeah, man, let's get some football in, and we'll report back next week. I love this fact that we have 6 games this weekend to kind of wean us off of. We go from 16 to 6 to like 4.
Yeah.
Then you kind of break it down. So it's nice to have another game this weekend.
Absolutely. Talk to you next week, man. Have a great rest of the week.
All right, man. Bye-bye.
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.